Welcome to the Strange and Interesting Podcast, a show about folklore, the paranormal, urban legends, and pretty much anything else that I happen to find strange or interesting. I am your host, Al. And joining me today, I have a guest from the United Kingdom, Arabella. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, it's a lovely spring day here in Wisconsin. And if anyone's familiar with our weather this time of year, it can be very unpredictable, but we've been pretty lucky lately. So how is the weather usually for you guys out there? I mean, is it usually pretty stable or does it tend to be on?
It's mainly a bit dull here, but it's actually been a really nice day today. The flowers are in bloom. It's been quite hot for us, which is rare. So it was nice to go on a walk with my children earlier.
Well, that's good because here our weather can be pleasant and sunny one day, and then the next day we're getting hit with a lot of snow. So we never know what to expect. So I met Arabella through a Facebook group, and it was for people who are either looking to be a guest on a podcast or people who want to have guests. And Arabella had made a post about how she had grown up in a haunted house. And I believe you also mentioned you work as a spiritual therapist.
Yeah, that's right.
So I thought it sounded like you'd be a good fit for the show. So I'm very happy that we were able to work this out and get a schedule so you could come and join me today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So let's start out. If you could please introduce yourself.
Of course, yeah. Well, as you know, my name's Arabella. I'm known as the Mystic Belle. I live in West Sussex, in England, and I'm a mum of three and also an author and a spiritual therapist.
And you had mentioned on your Facebook post that you grew up in a haunted house. So that's something that I think a lot of people, myself included, we hear about on TV shows, but most people probably don't know someone who grew up in that type of a situation. So first, do you know what caused the house to be haunted?
At the start, it was always haunted, but there are certainly a few things that made the paranormal activity increase. For example, my parents, they didn't tell me this when I was until I was older, but my parents did a Ouija board, a spirit board in the house. And when my mum told me, I kind of told her off for it. I said, you shouldn't have been doing that stuff, especially when we were sleeping upstairs. We were really little at the time, me and my siblings, but that would have certainly increased the paranormal activity. The house was built in the 1800s, and it was originally a farmhouse. It was extremely old. It was the oldest house in the village. And funnily enough, our next door neighbours, they actually lived in the house before us. So apparently when my parents moved in, they said to my parents, there's something in the house. As I said, it was the oldest house in the village. I didn't become aware of anything spiritual in the house until I was about 10 years old. I've got many stories, but some of the ones that stick out to me, almost on a nightly basis, the house would be engulfed in this very strange energy. It was a really uneasy feeling, and it just felt like you were really, really being scrutinized and watched, and it really wasn't a pleasant feeling at all. So I remember almost on a nightly basis, I would wake up the same time around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and my room would be engulfed in this strange atmosphere. And then I saw a figure of a person run through my walls, and I thought I could hear voices from downstairs, and obviously everyone was asleep, but that was really weird. And especially when I used to go to the bathroom at night time, I would look down at the bottom of the stairs and I would see a figure looking up at me. I couldn't see their face, only the detailing of their clothing, but that was really, really uneasy. And sorry, I've got a few, I've written them down because there's just so many. but you might like to hear, and the audience might like to hear about one time. I remember, because I was at school at the time, I was putting out my school clothes on my chair for the next day in my room, and I put my black socks on the chair. Literally, I turned around for a second, and when I looked back, they had vanished into thin air. Then I said out loud, because this was really weird, because I had experienced footsteps, my name being called in my mother's voice, which actually happened for a few years after that, and it literally only stopped about 7 years ago. So that happened for a very long time for me. So I was used to all these like banging footsteps, things moving on their own, but I wasn't used to things like randomly disappearing. So like I said, the socks had vanished. And so I said out loud, if that was you, can you put them back again? And I turned away from the chair, waited a few minutes, and sure enough, when I looked at the chair again, there were my socks. And that was really weird. And another time, I used to have, ironically, I used to have a shelf of dolls in my room, which is kind of asking for trouble. Like we all see the films about the shelf of dolls, and yeah, I wasn't really a girly girl, but my mother kind of wanted me to be a girly girl, so I had this a shelf of dolls, and my parents had just got married in Jamaica, and they had brought me back a doll, and literally one night again, I woke up at the same time. And there was this feeling like something was in the room with me. And the head of the doll they had brought back from Jamaica literally turned slightly towards me. And then my bedroom door started moving on its own. And I looked at it in disbelief, and I was thinking, am I making this up? But the door was literally moving. It was opening, and I screamed and it stopped, which was quite an incredible thing to witness.
Yeah, I think if I saw a doll's head like turn and face me, I'd be like, okay, that's it. Mom, Dad, I'm sleeping outside for the rest of my life.
Yeah, their bedroom was right down the hallway, so obviously I had to. It was because I used to suffer with sleep paralysis, night
Okay.
paralysis. That because obviously, from my understanding, night paralysis affects people in different ways. Like some people see figures on their bed, some people can't move. In my experience, it felt like I was awake, but I was kind of dreaming, and I was thrown around the room by this force. And then I was put back into my body. And when I woke up in a cold sweat. I couldn't move. I couldn't even talk. And I remember one night I had a mirror next to my bed. And so I could see the reflection of my bedroom door who was coming in, and I saw this it must have been like 6 foot, 7 foot dark figure, shadow figure one night. And I prayed and I prayed, and I told it to go away. It went away. That was scary though.
Yeah, I've heard of shadow person encounters, which sounds like that's what it was. Because I did an episode on shadow people a while ago, and like one of the theories is that they're common with sleep paralysis because you get in this state where your mind is awake, but your body hasn't. Well, the theory is that when you go to sleep, your brain mentally shuts down your body's movement so you don't roll around too much or accidentally hurt yourself if you're having a bad dream. But sometimes you wake up, your mind is awake, but your body, it hasn't quite regained control, which can cause that paralysis and can sometimes also cause you to see things out of the corner of your eyes. So I can imagine how that must have been terrifying. Now, you mentioned you saw a figure. Was he dressed in clothing that was more contemporary, or was it clothing like from like Victorian age England?
So it's interesting because the figure I saw, I remember the first time it was a woman. The first time I saw her was when I was about 11, and a family friend had died that day, and I was in the study near the oldest part of the house, and I was crying, and I remember suddenly feeling not alone in the room, and I looked up, and I saw a figure of a woman near the doorway. She was in a dress. I could see the detailing of the hem of her dress. It had like feathers on, intricate patterns, and she was see-through, but she was there. She was staring at me. And my first thought was, how do I get out the room? Like, do I walk through her? Do I walk past her? What do I do? And so from then on, I don't know why I called her this, but I called her Lucy. And from then on, I began to see her frequently. And unknown to me at the time, when I was growing up, because this was my childhood home, my mum actually saw a figure of a woman, but she was a solid apparition, a figure of a woman in the hallway in our house going up the stairs. So I think she actually saw, the solid apparition of Lucy, and I don't know why, but I just saw like the figure of her. But that's quite interesting because, yeah, Lucy would have shown herself to my mum as well as me. And because our house used to be a farmhouse originally, and so we had outhouses. Like, for example, we would use the old barn as a garage to store cars in. And one time my mum saw a little boy and a man only visible from the waist up in the garden. So there were probably multiple spirits there, but I only dealt with Lucy. At first I wasn't scared of her, but as the years progressed, I started to become aware that she might not be, as good as I thought she was.
So you felt like she was more of a malevolent spirit?
As the years got on, and I became older, she was definitely feeding off the energy of the house, like everything that was going on, because we had quite a few tough years with a family member's addiction, and obviously with addiction, you invite negative spirits in, and so I believe she was feeding off of that. And also, when I used to tell my family members about Lucy, they didn't. I felt like I was going mad half of my life, because obviously I was experiencing these things and no one else was. No one else seemed to care. But now I'm a mum of 3. I understand why my parents didn't really pay much attention to it, because they didn't want to, they didn't want me to pursue my interest even more. But unfortunately, I did. I became quite obsessed with living in a haunted house. And then it's when things started to happen to family members. I mean, for example, I used to have my friend over a lot from school, and she would hate sleeping on her own in the spare room. And so I would sleep in the spare room with her. And I remember one night, she woke me up. She's like, Arabella. I was like, yeah, what? And clear as day, because the spare room had wooden floorboards, and so clear as day, we heard someone walking very slowly around the bed, which was quite scary. And another time, I don't know if you're familiar with The Others, the film.
I have not seen that, no.
One situation I had was quite familiar. It was quite similar. I mean,
wait, I think that's the one with Nicole Kidman, right?
Yeah, and
okay.
The 2 children.
Okay, yeah, I have seen that. Okay, yeah, I have seen that movie. I just forgot the name for a moment.
Yeah. Nicole Kidman, and then she finds out she and the children are ghosts at the end. And spoiler alert. And basically, in one scene, Nicole Kidman, she is downstairs and she's sewing, and she hears people running up and down upstairs, and no one's upstairs. So I was home alone. My mum had gone shopping, and I was home alone with the dogs. And it was during the daytime, and normally I didn't really sense anything during the daytime, only at night time. But this time I did. And I suddenly began to hear something or someone running up and down the landing upstairs, and it sounded like they were about to come down the stairs. And I was really nervous. I was praying and praying. I was like, please don't come down the stairs. And then after a few minutes, it stopped. But obviously I said before, I felt like I was going mad because I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really, really sensitive to spiritual energy. I could pick up on stuff, other people tend not to pick up on. And so it was kind of adjusting to the way I felt. And it's only recently that I discovered, my spiritual abilities fully and why I felt things the way I did. And so it's been a kind of roller coaster, but definitely an interesting roller coaster.
Yeah, because the others, I thought it didn't have an interesting take how it did that flip in the movie where it's like you thought it was Nicole Kidman and her kids were being haunted, but then finding out they were the ghosts, and it kind of gives you a new perspective on hauntings. It's like, are there ghosts who view us as haunting them? And now when you mentioned this Lucy ghost that was in your house, did you ever have any, did you just always see her, or did you ever have any interactions with her?
Well, I used to call out to her a lot, which obviously now I know probably isn't a good thing to do. But she never revealed herself to me. I remember one time, this was before I actually moved out of the house. So I had grown up in that house literally from when I was born. And funnily enough, I was actually scanning through your podcasts this morning, and I came across a Lincolnshire folklore. I can't remember the name of it, but you mentioned something about Lincolnshire. And funnily enough, I actually went to school in Lincolnshire, so I know it quite well. But Lincolnshire is, again, haunted. So I was living in a haunted house. I was going to a haunted school in a haunted town.
So can't seem to escape ghosts no matter where you go.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. One theory of paranormal activity, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this, but it's noted that a lot of time it's not unusual for people to see ghosts that are dressed in clothing from an earlier age and, ghosts walking through walls. And one of the theories is, and I'm not sure if it's really well accepted in paranormal circles anymore, but one of the theories is that some people are out of sync with the time that they're in, which causes an echo of them to appear in the future. And that's supposed to explain why is it common for people to see ghosts that are dressed in clothing that's, 100 or 200 years old? It's because, this person is just going about their daily life back, in their time. It's just for some reason, this image of them is echoing into the future. And the reason they might seem to go through a wall or go through the floors, because if a home was renovated, maybe in that person's time, there wasn't a door there, there was a door there, but then a wall got put up. So to that person, they're walking through a door, but you see them as walking through a wall. So I always thought that was an interesting theory.
Yeah, definitely. And it reminds me of the time where I remember I came downstairs to the sitting room one day, and we had 3 dogs, and this never happened ever again. It only happened just once. And they were literally standing side by side, sitting down, just staring at the window, which was behind the TV, which actually is the oldest part of the house. And they were growling. They were actually growling. And I said to my dad, why are they growling? And then he said that used to be the front door. So that was quite interesting. But I totally agree with, when a house is renovated, obviously spirits, there are many different layers of hauntings in my personal opinion. You can get residual hauntings. I think it's called the stone tape theory.
Yes.
But I believe that some spirits know they're dead, and then others don't. And then some of the hauntings that we see are actually just echoes from the past, like you said. I believe the one I experienced in that house was probably an echo of the past, but also a negative attachment that a family member had.
Yeah, because I've heard of that too, how if some great tragic events happens in an area, that energy somehow imprints itself on the environment. And it's funny when we mentioned that theory about how ghost sighting might actually be just an echo of someone from the past. There was a friend of mine who told me a joke from a comedian. I think it was Bill Burr, but he was talking about hauntings. It's like, how come whenever we see ghosts, it's always someone from the Victorian age? It's never someone from 2010 looking for their iPhone or something like that. So now, do you know, was anyone murdered or did anyone die in your house?
I'm actually not entirely sure, but I know, I was told that they used to hang people near my village back in the day, but that's about all I've heard about. And there was also a cemetery. There were two cemeteries nearby, so that could be linked. But in regards to that house, I'm not entirely sure about who died in the house. But when I moved out of that house, I was thinking, oh, finally, we're going to move to a normal house, that's not haunted. And sure enough, it was haunted. Yeah, it was an old people's home. We moved down I lived in Nottinghamshire, near Lincolnshire. We moved down south, down to Sussex. And it was in a very, very remote area. It was in a place called the South Downs. And the house used to be an old people's home. And I remember it was around, the first night I was in bed, and directly below my room was the dining room, and obviously no one's going to be in the dining room at like 3 a.m. And I heard banging coming from downstairs, and even my mum could hear it from her room, and she just dismissed it. I to be honest, I don't, I think that she didn't want me scared, so she just said it's next door, even though our house was detached. It wasn't attached to next door. So that was weird. And then about a few days later, I was in the garden, and the village itself just had a really, really uneasy feeling at nighttime. The whole village, it again felt like you were being watched. And I remember I was sitting in the garden, and suddenly I saw it took me 5 minutes to kind of accept what I was seeing. So I saw 3 figures, but this time I could see their facial features, basically 3 ghosts, and they were linking arms, and it was 2 men and a woman, and they were very much aware that I could see them, and I've never had an experience like this since. They were really happy, they were laughing, chatting to one another. They linked arms as they walked around the garden, and I was just sitting on the swing bench, and I was thinking I was going mad but then I really kind of accepted what I was seeing, and I just let it play out in front of me. And this lasted for a good 10 minutes, and it was amazing to see. And then they looked at me, and then they just slowly vanished into thin air.
Now, you said that they used to hang people near your old house. Have you ever done any research into that to see if there were any women that were hung?
No, I haven't actually. I might do. All these years later, I might do. But a lot of stuff happened in that house quite it became quite negative. So after we moved, we were kind of just in a state of self-healing and recharging, and because basically the family member that had an alcohol addiction, unfortunately, we lost him to it. And it's kind of, it's not nice to see, obviously, but as the addiction took more hold of him, the energy of the house became darker. And you could see in his eyes, I remember one time his eyes actually went black. And that is a sign of a spirit attachment, and not a very good one. So, obviously the house, or the spirit Lucy, was feeding off that. And as I said, as we moved, we just kind of wanted to kind of just heal from all those years of putting up with it, and also adjusting to making a new life for ourselves.
So when you were growing up with in these houses that were haunted, how did you cope with that? Did you just at the time, did you try to like rationalize it away that this is just my imagination? Or did you have other coping mechanisms that you used to try to deal with these hauntings?
A big thing for me was prayer. I just used to pray a lot, and then I used to do research at school about what ghosts were and how could I help them, because I did want to help Lucy, but I didn't know how. And I remember the day that we moved out of that house, I went to another thing I forgot to mention. I went to the dining room in our old home, and there was a chair in the corner which she actually used to sit, and we used to have Sunday lunches as a whole family there, and she actually used to sometimes sit in the chair and look at us, and that was quite freaky, really. Yeah. But no, I couldn't really help her. I remember I became scared of her, to be honest, because I realised that she wasn't a very good spirit. So I remember on the day, like I said, we were moving out, and I went to the dining room, and I actually said that I was leaving now, goodbye. And that was it. She gave me no sign. So yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard of people trying to do that, where when they do have they find out that there is a ghost or something in their house, they try to find out, okay, is this, a spirit that just can't move on for whatever reason? And of course, it's almost a bit of a cliche in some horror movies where you have that ghost who has unfinished business and they're not able to move on to the next life until something is resolved. So I found that interesting when you said that there was the cemetery, and then also they used to do hangings. And that's what got me to thinking, wondering if like Lucy was maybe someone who was hung, maybe she was wrongly convicted, and then that's what's kept her attached to that house. Just a thought.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I've never really thought about it like that. I just thought, she was, I don't know, to be honest. I think it's a question that, will puzzle me probably for the rest of my life, what she was.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all you can really do is just try to think, okay, how do you cope with it? There's an old TV show I used to watch called Sightings. It's been off the air for a couple of decades. It was from when I was a kid, but they would explore a variety of paranormal topics. Sometimes they would talk about ghosts. Sometimes they talk about UFOs. Sometimes they talk about like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or other cryptids. And they had one episode where they were interviewing a family that lived in a haunted house. And the mother thought the best way she deal with it is she took like an old spray bottle and put some lavender scented water in it and told her child that, well, if you think there's a ghost, just spray this. This is actually magical ghost spray that'll keep the ghost away. And that's how they coped with the hauntings.
Yeah, I mean, I never had anything like that. I just literally just used to pray or say, go away. And then as I became older, I actually used to rebuke the energy in the name of Jesus. I mean, one time this is the only time that I've ever had a solid apparition, visitation. It was in the house where I moved down with my mum in the South Downs. And one night I was out walking my dog. Like I said, there's a really weird atmosphere to the village. And I just felt like I was being watched. And this was winter time. No one was out. It was rare to see anyone, to be honest, in the village. And I shone the torch on my phone. And literally, obviously, time works differently in the spirit realm. And this must have lasted about 3 seconds, but it felt a lot longer. And I shone the torch in front of me. And I was just around the corner of my house. And I saw, sitting cross-legged in the middle of the road, he had a blue duffel coat on, brown hair. He literally turned so slowly. He turned his head slowly towards me, and he looked me right in the eye, and he vanished right in front of me. And I just like, tears were streaming down my face. I was frozen to the spot. I had never encountered anything like that before. And then it was weird. I immediately just went back inside my home, and I told my mum. And when I was telling her, it was weird, because it was like my third eye had been opened even more, because when I was telling her, I saw that man like sitting in the corner of the room, and I literally jumped out my skin, because I just kept like seeing this man, and I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't switch it off. And in the end, I was just like, go away, I rebuke you, I don't want you here. And he went away. So I believe at the time I was going through my spiritual awakening had kind of started when it came to becoming more aware of like the spiritual realm.
Okay. So you mentioned mostly using prayer or telling the ghosts to go away as a way to cope and also to protect yourself from hostile spirits. Yeah. Have you ever found any other methods that have worked for when you do encounter a malevolent spirit?
Yeah, I've just rebuked them in the name of Jesus.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you're a spiritual therapist. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your work what does a spiritual therapist do?
Yeah, I help people get the closure and comfort and motivation they deserve. If they want to book a session with me or anything, they can find me online at the Mystic Belle Facebook. And I basically, I help them overcome obstacles in their life. Yeah, I just help as many people as I can, really.
You mentioned you were an author. What type of books do you write?
Mainly about spiritual ones, past life regression, and I've only written one book really, and I write articles about various folklore.
Thank you very much for joining me today, Arabella. So again, you can go ahead and find her on Instagram. And until next time, everyone, stay strange and stay interesting. You have been listening to a presentation of Point of Insanity Game Studio. Visit us on the web at www.poigamestudio.com. Follow me on most social media sites at POI Game Studio. And check out my music channel on YouTube at Al Seeger Music.